Hello and welcome back to more Willow Talk, or if you're joining us for the first time, welcome full stop. Adam Peacock here with News Corp cricket writer Ben Horne for this episode. Benny, how are you, mate?
Very good, Adam. Yeah, another day 4 with no cricket on, so it's all happening at rapid pace at the moment, but another great test match.
Day 4 and 5. We're without our other H's. Did I say that correctly? You know, you always, as a kid, used to get in trouble for saying
H or H.
Yeah. Which one is it again?
I've always thought H.
Yeah. Well, Haddon and Healy. Well, Haddon is still in Adelaide somewhere at some distillery, I dare say, by now. No, he'll be back later in the week, and Healy's off being an Australian cricketer or preparing to become an Australian cricketer once again. So how well, not just the men, but the women go against India.
Oh,
this is beautiful stuff the last week.
Incredible. Yeah, no, they're just steamrolling India at the moment.
Shout out to all our Indian listeners out there. No, welcome along. We welcome all from all around the world, and we will spend the glut of today's episode reviewing the second test of the Border-Gavaskar Trophy in Adelaide. All the storylines with your good self, Benny, because there's not a lot of days to stir up more interest if you need it before the Brisbane test, but we're going to try anyway because I want to know what the perspective of the headline makers are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're just not short on headlines at the moment, are you? After the first test, it was all about Australia being in crisis mode. How do they respond? And in the space of 2.5 days in Adelaide, the shoe's on the other foot now. I mean, India's just been smashed by 10 wickets. They don't have some of the fitness issues, I suppose, that Australia had coming out of the first test, but they've got plenty of question marks on Rohit Sharma. They tried him down the order. Once they've done that, can they go back to putting him back up to open now that didn't work? Or are they stuck with him there? And I'm a bit worried about their fast bowling depth as well. Harshit Rana, the third quick, was outclassed in that test. And Mohammed Siraj, I thought was good, but and I'm sure we'll get to it later. But just his emotional regulation will be interesting to watch for the rest of the series.
There's a man speaking who's got kids. Emotional regulation. There it is. Now, yes or no, because we'll get to it a bit later on, but Josh Hazlewood comes back in for the Gabba?
Not certain. I think he's got to get through some fitness tests and see how he pulls up from the main training sessions this week. But there's a lot of confidence from Australia that he'll be right. And if he is fit, I think you can say for sure they'll bring him back in. Good,
because in this episode, we're going to hear from Josh Hazlewood in something that we banked a month or so ago. And it's in our series. I think Sammy, the producer, called it Deep Points, which I don't mind. That's a good label for it.
Well done.
But the details, and we've had Marnus talking about his bats and he's waited, and thankfully it worked out for him in Adelaide, and Paddy Cummins talking about steering an innings home with the bat. Well, Josh Hazlewood, the subject with him, is a pertinent one for a bowler like his great self. It's setting up a batter, how he goes about the process of setting up a batter. So for all you park cricketers out there, or you youngsters out there, or people who just love watching Test cricket, it's an intriguing chat about Josh Hazlewood inside his mind about how he does it, because he's done it for over a decade now in the Australian Test arena. We're going to take a look also at what's happening around the grounds in Australia and abroad. Plenty. It seems like everyone's playing cricket right now, including China, the Titanic clash between China and Thailand. A bit later on, we'll get to that. We've got Sundries as well. Now, some housekeeping, Benny, before we get into the show. Hads, Heels and Travis Head will be back for Thursday's show to preview the third test and the BBL, which starts on Saturday night.
See what you mean about the H theme as well. Like you're really the odd man out.
Yeah. Adam Peacock. I'm going to change my name.
The Big Bash. It's coming up fast, isn't it? I think it's going to be a great summer, actually. And having David Warner there for the entire summer, I mean, I know he's only playing for one team, but I think that's going to give the competition a massive lift.
And the best thing about the Big Bash is he doesn't need to step away from commentary duties. He can do both while out there for the Thunder. Now, we are hurtling to our podcast review targets on Apple. We're on 188, chasing 200. Spotify, we've cracked 700 already. Now, the target by the end of the summer was 708. An ode to the great man, Shane Keith Warne. But we're going to shift that target now. We're after Murali. We're after 800, okay, by the end of the Sri Lanka Test series. We've given ourselves a little buffer there. So early Feb.
Yeah. No, I'm backing you in.
Big thank you to you if you've left a rating, and review if you haven't, please do. Also, drop us a message on social media. Kelvin and Jeff tagged us on Instagram as part of their Spotify Wrapped favourite podcasts of the year. We'd love to see that. So send some more through. DM us about that on Instagram and or TikTok. Are you across Spotify Wrapped, Benny?
I look, I'm probably young enough to be, but I'm not. And my kids haven't quite got to that age yet. But I was hearing about it before.
Yeah.
Well,
So
what can you tell us?
I've done it, and I've hit the button, and yes, your podcast topic, your favourite one was sports. I was in the top 9% of sports there. But interestingly enough, and I swear to whatever great man's above or around us or whatever, that my 8-year-old daughter got hold of my phone around the June mark, because June, apparently to Spotify Rap, according to Spotify Rap, was your Pink Pilates Princess Strut Pop season. Thank you, Spotify Rap. Well, I was all about artists like Billie Eilish, Olivia Rodrigo, and Katy Perry. So
yeah, we'll have to verify that, I think. I'll just jump in the car with you for a few trips and see what comes on the radio.
Check the algorithm out. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's talk some cricket, not Pilates, Pink, Strut, Pop, whatever it was. Australia strutting again after the second test in Adelaide. 10-wicket win. Some great performers, some ones that stood out stats-wise, like Paddy taking wickets, Mitch Starc taking wickets, Travis Head with the celebration, the Bub celebration, and another great century on home turf. But Marnus finding some form, scratching around for form and finding it. And Nathan McSweeney with an ultra-important knock to get to stumps on night one the way Australia did. What for you was the tone of Australia's win?
For me, it was Marnus and McSweeney. I mean, I know, the man of the match has to go to Travis Head or Mitchell Starc, the way they blew the game open. And they were fantastic, take nothing away from them. But we know how pink ball tests go, the pattern that they follow. And the example was there in the Indian innings, being 4-5 down at stumps. That easily could have been Australia on night one if Marnus or McSweeney had got out quickly, because they can really get on a run then. So that partnership to get Australia through to stumps on night one, only being 1 down, that to me was the test match. And that was really heavy-duty stuff. That was not easy. Especially Marnus being under the pressure he was under. I can't really think of an Australian batsman being under that sort of pressure for several years. And he really was. Like, if Marnus had failed in this test and Australia had lost, I think he was gone for the Gabba. I think it was his last chance.
What was the word on a possible replacement? Because looking at it, and we've discussed this for the last 2 months on this podcast, there isn't one just banging down the door to say, pick me.
There's not, no. I mean, look, I guess Josh Inglis would have been a favourite, given he's in the squad. Obviously, that would have required a fair bit of rejigging of the lineup to get him in, because he's really a middle order player. But look, there's a couple now. Now that the test summer's underway. I mean, Sam Constas has made 100 in the Prime Minister's 11, followed it up with 88 for New South Wales. And look, Curtis Patterson, maybe it's a little premature, but we're talking about someone who made 150 in his last test for Australia, and he's come back into the team this year, made I think 4 half centuries, and now 167 not out. So I'm keeping a bit of an eye on Curtis Patterson as well. Look, who was coming in was not an obvious answer, but I think if Marnus had failed in this test, and as I say, Australia lost because Australia win and Marnus fail, maybe they keep carrying him through. But I think, perhaps they would have maybe drawn the line there for his own sake. Go and get some confidence, and we'll see you, down the track. But, I had a lot of appreciation for Marnus's innings, because that was serious pressure he was under. A lot of talk about, was his mind jumbled, and, he sorted himself out, and that was really tough performance.
There was a long article on cricket.com.au after the test was done in Adelaide, and sorry, they're not your words. You're a great journalist, Benny, but it was elsewhere, this article, going into great detail from Marnus's perspective about what he did in between tests. And typical Marnus, it wasn't, get away from the game, go fishing for 5 days and come back to it. Yeah. It was a stack of work and a stack of questions asked to everyone around him. And you've watched the guy operate in the nets to prepare, but this would have been diving to the deepest well that he's got to try and find something. And he's saying it was all about his setup. It wasn't so much about what he was doing at delivery. It was about setting up and getting his head movement and his weight, and I don't know the intricacies of it, and never will, but it was all little subtle adjustments that we couldn't really tell to the naked eye, but work for him.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just loved watching him come out. Just the look in his eye. It was like a boxer sort of stepping into the ring, and this is my moment. And I think Marnus is often a bit of an easy target because of his kind of quirky personality and some of the silly things that happens on the field. I feel like he's a bit of an easy target for teammates and commentators sort of jibing him a little bit. But beneath all that, like, I mean, he is a tough cricketer. Like, he was averaging about 32 in Sheffield Shield cricket before he was plucked out to play Test cricket by Justin Langer. And so to step up from being a very average Shield player to being a Test player who's averaging 50, to improve at the top level like he has, he's got something about him. And, it doesn't mean that he's, he can't be dropped. And 64 certainly... That's not the end of it for Marnus. He needs to keep going because he's had a few of these half centuries in this long trough that he's had. So the job's not done for him. But what this innings showed was how he's not easily dispensed with. Like, he's not a guy that you can just easily drop from the team and say we can improve this team because he's a key part of this side.
I don't know if you've picked up this scent, Ben, after the second test, but I can just smell it in the air. There's a hint of a siege mentality about the Australian cricket team at the moment. A few of them came out and like, oh, we're not as bad as you think we are, type tone. Have you noticed that?
Definitely. Well, I mean, the big comment was from Marnus, speaking on Fox Cricket after play, said, apparently last week we were the worst team ever, which I'm not sure that was ever said.
Well, last week, Ivory Coast got bowled out for 7. And yes, Australia was on par with... No, like he's taken it to an extreme there, hasn't he?
But yeah, I mean, it's such a common thing in sport, isn't it? For, Des Hasler in rugby league was the master of it, the siege mentality. And, I guess it's a team that's had a pretty large amount of success over the last few years. They're not used to criticism. Certainly they're not used to losing by 295 runs at home.
Kind of opens yourself up a bit, doesn't it?
So,
to like some opinion from elsewhere. If you get beat like that.
So yeah, I mean, look, I think the majority of criticism out of Perth was fair enough. It was around Australia's preparation or lack thereof, which I think is fair game. It was about a couple of players, particularly Marnus, who were under huge amounts of pressure. But I think the selectors did the right thing. I think the regeneration of this team. We'll see after this series what happens, what needs to happen there. But once you're in the series, I think you've got to stick with the plan. And as this team has done, they stay cool and calm under pressure, and that includes the selectors. They stuck with those guys and gave them a chance, and they delivered.
So as we sit here now, we don't know if Mohammed Siraj and Travis Head, the unless you've found out, I'm not sure what exactly they're going to be fined and a percentage of the match fee, no doubt. Is it out there?
They've been charged. There's definitely charges. It's either going to be a reprimand or a fine. I mean, it's not going to be worse than that.
So it was, Head goes bananas with the bat, starts tonking Siraj around. Siraj gets his measure. Travis Head says, well bowled. Well bowled. Mohammed Siraj, a little bit agitated at being embarrassed in front of the full house. Decides to think that he said horrible things about his family or something, I'm not sure, and then just goes at him. Travis Head turns around and says something rhyming with duck and something about seeing him next Tuesday. So anyway, they seem to make up at stumps. After the game was done. Bit of a hug, sorted it out like men. That was fine. For me, it's done. But you being a journalist who asks questions, Ben, you're just going to stoke this, aren't you, and make it a headline before the third test at the Gabba.
Yeah, we need this stuff. We need this to get us through. Look, I'll start by saying that I loved it, and I've got no issue with what happened at all. It's great for the game, and I think why it sort of became so big was because we've missed this sort of stuff. Like, I think the game, maybe with the players being so familiar with each other these days in the IPL and all that sort of thing, it's become a bit more friendly and sterile. And obviously we don't want the ugly sledging and all that sort of stuff. But this heat of the moment, fast bowler who's been hit around, letting some steam off, I liked it. And I don't think either player needs to apologise. I think it's great theatre for the game. To be honest, if I had a look at the interpretation of it, I think the way you ran through it there, I think maybe Mohammed Siraj has been a little harshly judged here, because the way I saw it was Siraj definitely carried on a bit at taking the wicket. He stared him down, carried on, probably goosed himself a bit given Travis Head was 140. Travis Head has then sort of sarcastically, I think you got to say, said, well bowled, I'm 140 and, you're 150 behind in the test. And then I think the word that rhymes with duck might have come out from Travis Head. And then Siraj has sort of said, all right, well, there's the dressing room, on your bike. So I felt like Siraj, in terms of the actual send-off itself, was probably reacting to what Head said rather than the other way around. But, look, emotions were bubbling away. I think Travis Head's handled himself very well afterwards. He's basically admitted that he actually regretted sort of slightly losing it to that point. He wishes the victory is just walking off the field. But, the power of Travis Head in Adelaide was just the best part of it. The crowd erupting
he's the
and
king.
Siraj responding to it. And, it sets the tone for the next test. And, it was great stuff.
So Mohammed Siraj also stirred it mid-test by doing the interview on Star Sports, which then gets translated because it's in Mohammed's native tongue. So when that happens as a journalist, are you running around to try and find a translator to go, what did he say, what did he say? Because Harsha Bogle did it beautifully. I was listening. Sorry, Triple M Cricket, I was listening to you mainly on thing, but Harsha came on ABC and gave the full rundown about exactly what he said.
Yeah. Look, I wasn't at the ground in Adelaide, so it was my method was probably slightly different to if I was at the ground. So I didn't know about this going to air on Star until I was watching Fox Cricket, as I always do, but I saw something come up on Channel 7 that they had put a translation of what had been said. So I'd seen the translation before I knew about the original, before I saw the original interview. But look, it's an interesting question because Harsha's translation may have been different to what Channel 7 came up with. So, yeah, there is that. And I think the jarring word that was used there was liar.
But Harsha did say there was different variations of how you could interpret that.
Yeah.
It wasn't a direct translation.
Yeah.
That word to liar.
Yeah.
It was not quite the truth.
Yeah.
For instance.
Which is, and good on Harsha for pointing that out. So, yeah, look, that probably got missed a little bit in just that sort of hard translation of what had been said. But look, that particular comment really didn't kind of cause the outrage that I thought it would when I first saw it, because the players shook hands and embraced afterwards, and it looked like Siraj, and good on him for doing so, took it upon himself to say, yeah, look, it's been a bit of a misunderstanding. Let's just move on. So, yeah, it was. Look, I don't think that necessarily means anything come Brisbane. I think the Australians and certainly the crowd will be into Siraj.
Oh, he gets booed.
Yeah.
Anytime he goes out to the fence or gets the ball chucked to him.
And I think Australia will be on his case too, because they know he's someone who, can fly off the handle.
Yeah. But these things in Test cricket history, one clearly springs to mind that we still think about and enjoy watching and then go down the YouTube rabbit hole, Steve Waugh, Curtly Ambrose. Like the confrontation there in the West Indies in the mid-90s. And this wasn't that.
No.
But it's something that we're going to replay and go, oh, yeah, how cool is that?
Exactly, yeah. That's what I mean. I think we've been starved of this sort of stuff for a while. And so it felt bigger than what it was. Like, if you compare it to all those, famous run-ins between bowlers and batsmen, it probably didn't.
What's your favourite?
Didn't go that high.
You've watched a lot of cricket over the years.
There's been some great ones. I mean, there was that one between Curtly Ambrose, Steve Waugh. It's hard to go past that. But there was one in South Africa, 2014, where Michael Clark called Dale Steyn a cheat.
Yeah.
And Dale didn't take too kindly for that. And that dragged on for about 6 months. Dale was not impressed about that.
I could think of better things to call Dale Steyn. But Michael is a very good batter, so he knew what he was doing in front of Dale.
Got out of it somehow. Yeah.
Not sure he was setting his teammates up for success, though, because it just riled Dale Steyn. Remember that one? That was a beauty.
Yeah, you got to be very careful having a crack at a fast bowler.
Yeah, pick your target.
Yeah.
Pick your target. Just on what's going on beneath the surface, and you're across this story, about the age of the Australian team. Now, it's not relevant after a 10-wicket win. It is relevant after a 295-run loss. Where's it at? And where's the succession planning? And have you asked questions about, selectors and those in Cricket Australia about what they are thinking might happen in the next 18 months with this team?
Well, I think coming into this series before a ball was bowled, I think the dream result or the hope was that, Australia beats India. and the bulk of this team can get through 12 months to next year's Ashes. And, maybe that is not necessarily, but maybe that's an end point for some players, a home Ashes series. Yeah, what a way to go out. I think that quickly changed based on what happened in Perth, because suddenly you go, maybe we don't have this amount of time, because when it happens, it can happen quickly. I think obviously a lot is going to be determined by the result of this series. If Australia win this series, they have to have played well to have done that, and then I think you feel a bit more emboldened to show faith in these guys that have delivered and done the job. But I do think that it's probably something that needs to be reviewed after this series. I don't like the idea of mass changes in the middle of the series, especially now we're 1-1 and it's really going to be game on until that last test in Sydney. So,
well, it won't happen now.
Yeah, you got to
after a
stick
series
with these guys.
Yeah.
But I think Usman Khawaja is probably one that sticks out. He's obviously got plenty of time to score runs to come in this series, and he would be a key man in Sri Lanka, which is where they go after the summer. He's outstanding against spin, so he's someone that you would want to take to Sri Lanka. But being 38 years of age, he's one that sort of stands out as, it's on the margins of how you'd want to progress. Steve Smith, for me, still has oodles of time. Like, Steve Smith, you just got to back a great player like that, and he will come good. And I think with his record, he can play for as long as he wants. I think the big thing with Steve Smith is his decision. There won't be pressure on him from the selectors, but I think it'll come down to, if Steve doesn't feel like he's playing at his best and delivering his best, does he want to continue as a mere mortal in Test cricket? His standards have been so high. So, yeah, I think the ball would be in Steve's court. And in regards to the fast bowlers, I think perhaps things need to be, there needs to be some quicks brought through, but I think Hazlewood, Stark and Cummins still have so much cricket left.
Yeah, the one that made me think of Steve Smith is how do they approach it? Does he become like Pujara in India, who was basically just not selected anymore? Or is he probably down the path of a Kohli? It's like, you retire when you're good, mate. Whenever you want to retire, you can retire.
Yeah, well, for mine, it's the Kohli method.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, like, Steve Smith still averages like 56 in Test cricket. And, I wouldn't rule out a big score being around the corner in the next couple of tests. He was unlucky the way he got out in Adelaide.
But he keeps on getting... Not keeps on getting out, but that is a little shard of kryptonite aiming at his front hip.
Yeah, for me, Steve Smith's still got 12 months, even if he is struggling away a little bit. I don't see Steve Smith under any immediate pressure.
India. So are they under the pump from there? Would you, like, you talk to your Indian journalist mates over the buffet at lunchtime there when you're at the cricket, Benny? Do they go hard, like, in relation to, say, an English press and an Australian press when things aren't going well? And what would their reaction be and questions asked of their team in a week like this?
It's probably not quite as savage as how the English press pack might respond to a loss of that nature. But, there's so many eyeballs on that Indian team, from whether you're in the press conference room or you're back in India. So, a lot of questions to be asked. I think, looking at it, probably the big one is the captain, Rohit Sharma. I mean, he's the captain of the team. He's opened the batting for a long time now, and he's just slid back into the middle order. And whether or not the reason was because didn't want to disrupt the flow of what had happened in Perth, Rahul had played so well in the first test, or whether it was in response to Rohit's form of late, and the time has come for him to slot back into being a middle order player, I don't know. But the question for me now is, like, it didn't go well in that test. Can they change it now? Like, can the captain go? Can he now come back up the top? I mean,
I think he can.
Yeah.
I think, like, it felt like he was in trouble when he came in the other night, as opposed to him opening. And I'm not sure I would have felt that way if KL Rahul was coming in at that time.
Yeah.
And the balance with KL Rahul and a player like Rishabh Pant, who's not going to go out there and block 4 balls in a row, is he?
Yeah.
Case in point, his first ball that he faced against
Yeah.
Scotty Bowl, one of the most extraordinary shots we've ever seen in a Test match. But I reckon they make the change, but who knows?
Yeah, in that case, they stuffed up this team. They should have just been bold and put Rowett back up the top. So, look, otherwise, I mean, batsmen are allowed to fail, and they did, they came up against the best pink ball fast bowling attack there is. And there was a lot of very good bowling in that test. So, India, Jaswal, Kohli, there's still so many dangerous players in that lineup. I'll tell you who I've loved is the young all-rounder, Nitish Reddy. He's been outstanding. My biggest concern with India, to be honest, would probably be the support that Bumrah's getting. I mean, we know Bumrah's a freak, but just the other fast bowling spots.
I was watching on Fox, and I forget the comment. It might have been Bing, I'm not sure. It might have been another commentator that they took that beautiful sunset shot of a plane coming into land, and someone just murmured, Mohammed Shami on that flight. I don't think he is, unfortunately for India, and apparently he's pulled up sore after a game over there, so he might not take any part of the series. We'll wait and see. Hopefully he does, because he's world class, and it'd be great to have him part of the series. What about dealing with India from a media perspective? Is it shut us up? Is it really difficult from your point of view?
Oh, it is, but I mean, you sort of just expect that, I suppose. And the tone was set from when they turned up in Perth, and you didn't hear from anyone for a week, and there was, wasn't
there tarp up
over the nets? I mean, they do take it to a ridiculous level, but I can understand why they've put a stop to this. The fans at training, because we're not talking about like if Australia opened up training, you'd get a couple of hundred people come in and, it'd be a nice little atmosphere. It'd be good. But you talk there's literally thousands of people that are wanting to come and watch India train.
Yeah.
Like training is usually a pretty low key sort of environment. It's like I don't think that's them being overly petty. I can get that. But as a rule, I mean, we'd waited like more than a week for someone to talk in Perth. Finally expected Ravi Ashwin to come out, and it was that famous Indian player, Morne Morkel, came out for the first press conference, so he was the first person heard.
I can't say they're going to open everything up this week after what happened, but who cares? The cricket speaks for itself in many ways. Out of this one, again, another short test. So one of the things that came in my mind on Sunday night was 4-day test. Does that become a thing? Easier for everyone, especially logistically. Television companies booking all these facilities for 5 days, selling advertising. I can't presume that Channel 7 were overly happy about a 2.5-day test. But then it came up on Cricket Info. Anantha Narayanan, a writer there, delved into it, did all our work basically. So the findings were that the second test was the 4th shortest test in Australia. Only 1,031 balls were bowled. Hasn't been a 5-day test in Australia since the second Ashes test in December 2021, excluding rain-affected matches in Sydney. Wow. We've got to always make that caveat for Sydney. And since 2020, the average number of overs per test is 295, less than 4 days in matches with a result. Overall, 85% have had a result in the last 4 years, which is great because there's nothing that stings the brain more than a boring draw in a test match that basically you barely get a second bat. It's not happening at the moment. I reckon it's all because, not all because, but of the shorter attention spans of the players being developed now through T20 cricket. And it's only going to go further that way. It's probably not something that ICC is going to move on very quickly. You can tell me otherwise. What do you make about the concept of 4-day tests?
Well, my mind went exactly the same way that yours did. I wrote a comment piece about it after play last night as well. And
sorry, I didn't see that one.
It's not. I know you're just reading cricket.com. When
I left news, full disclosure, they gave me a year's worth of Code Sports subscription. It ran out last week, and I haven't got around to resubscribing, Ben. I will get around to it, I swear, because I love your pros and Dan Cherney and all of that. Carry on. Sorry.
No worries, mate. Too much time listening to Katy Perry. Look, it's not something I feel passionate about. We got to go from 4 to 5, but I think it's almost becoming logical. Like if tests are finishing, as you say, 85% are getting results, and certainly in this country they're over within 3 or 4 days. it just seems like a no-brainer because, you save money for the broadcasters, the boards who are putting the matches on. Theoretically, it allows you to maybe fit in more Test cricket and also allows you to schedule them around weekends like golf majors. You can sort of go from, which has been something that Mark Taylor's said for a long time, why not go Thursday to Sunday? So you don't have these matches that are on a Monday and Tuesday and no one can turn up.
Like this one would have ended if we had a thrilling finish on day 5. It's on a Tuesday in front of 10,000 people as opposed to 50.
Yeah. And, you saw in New Zealand, England cleaned them up in 3 days as well. So it's not just Test matches in Australia either. I think it's kind of like from a logical point of view. And look, Cricket Australia can afford to put on 5-day tests, but a lot of the reason why Test cricket's in trouble is not because of England, Australia, India, but all the other nations that it's expensive to put on Test cricket. They often do it at a loss, and it's not an easy thing for them to schedule. So if you can make it cheaper for them by making it 4 days, it's funny how the over rates are just getting worse and worse, but it just doesn't seem to matter.
No,
it makes no difference.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one thing it will do is encourage groundsmen in places like Pakistan to get the big heaters out over the wicket and produce result pitches as opposed to when Australia went there a while back. And I think it was Nathan Lyon said that was the worst pitch I've ever had to play Test cricket on because there was just nothing in it for anyone. It was a draw. It was like, a batathon. But then last series against England, they get out it looks like they all went to Bunnings and just surrounded the pitch with whatever they could do to try and rough it up and get it turning sideways on day one.
And look, the traditionalists will hate it. I know Nathan Lyon's dead against it. He's a big fan of 5 days and all that sort of thing. But the more shortened games that we get, and as you say, the trend towards perhaps batsmen not either wanting to or being able to dig in and play those really long, arduous innings, which used to be part of Test cricket, then it's just it just sort of gets to a point where it's like it's ridiculous to have 2 extra days up your sleeve, really.
Yeah. Well, T20 seems like the batter's game. Why can't Test cricket be the bowler's game? And the batters have to work it out.
Yeah, and more pink ball cricket for mine as well. I mean, it's such a great spectacle, and I know it was a one-sided test, but it was a great test.
Do you reckon India are pumped about having to play another pink ball test in Adelaide again in a few years' time? I reckon they might be putting their hand up to say,
that one.
I'm not entirely sure that will get through the BCCI. But anyway, we'll find out. Let's now go to our special guest for this particular podcast, Josh Hazlewood. Before the summer, I caught up with Josh as part of our Deep Points series. Josh and I chat about how he goes about setting up a batter and executing that plan. Here's the Hoff. Josh Hazlewood, let's talk about setting up a batter. I don't know how much gets planned about these days. We all hear about these meetings that cricketers hate having because it's hit the top of off and then run hard between the wickets and score a few runs and we'll win the game. But with your craft, how much do you plan to try and execute a plan in the heat of battle?
We'll grab the bowlers. We'll get together probably not a long time, probably 2 days out from the first test and together with a few of the coaches, analysts. All the data's already been sent through to us, so we can flick through that as much as we want or as little as we want. And then basically we'll get into a meeting and we'll come up with a plan. We'll start the openers, work our way through. And as you said, 9 times out of 10, it's top of off, occasional bouncer. And that sort of works for 9 out of 10 players. And literally the 10th player might be, let's move it a stump wider. Like, it's as simple as that. It's just about executing that out in the middle. But there's little, I think, where this setting the batsman up comes into play is once the game's rolling, different things sort of happen and you might see a change that he's made to counteract us, so trying to get a step ahead of us, and then we can discuss amongst ourselves while we're out there in the middle and come up with a plan.
Fair enough. So how often does the plan get scrunched up and how often does how often do you feel like it's really working?
I wouldn't say the plan gets scrunched up very often. I think it's still, that plan A is still a lot of the time the go-to plan. Probably more so for me and Paddy, and then Starkey sort of can get someone out any which way, and his good ball is good enough to get anyone out. So he's a little bit different, but Paddy and I probably stick to the same sort of plans a lot of the time. There's been a few instances where, someone sees something either during the game or maybe at training beforehand. I remember this one just come to mind actually. We're playing Pakistan last summer in Perth, and a lot of our training's done at the Wacker. We play at Perth Stadium, but a lot of the training's at the Wacker in the centre, and we're staying at Fraser Suites, which overlooks the ground. And so I'm halfway through bowling to Sakil, batted 5 Pakistan last year, coming in averaging 60-odd. Looked pretty good, and then Gazza just ran down. He said, I was watching from my room yesterday, and I saw Sakil really struggle in just riding the short balls. So he was riding everything that was short between, around the armpit to the head. So next ball, banged it in. It was spot on the money, and he rode it. And Davey Warden ran back first slip and caught it. So that worked pretty well. Yeah, things like that.
There was a recent Olympic Games where the Canadian coach got sent home for spying, sending a drone up. Is this legal from 1G line?
I think so, yeah. England used to watch us train all the time from Fraser Suites, so didn't work for them, but yeah.
That's a happy plan. That's a accidental plan coming off. What about when you get a batter of high quality? Like, he's got so much exposed form, 50 test matches. I'm talking the real good ones who are averaging 50 plus. I mean, how many different ways can you search around for a weakness with those guys?
Right. That's right. It comes down to the real little things. I think one thing that's really come in, and I'd say over the last maybe 5 or 10 years, is matchups. And I think they play a huge part. So we've got, if we're playing England and Stokesy walks out, it's probably Gazza and Paddy. If Joe Root walks out the bat, it's probably me and Paddy. And if Johnny Bairstow's batting, it's probably Starkey. So it's very numbers based of, Stark's got Johnny out 13 times or whatever, averaging 15. So he's your go-to man as soon as he walks in, because that's when they're most vulnerable, the first 20 balls. And you're not going to waste them me bowling to Johnny, because my matchup's not as good. So I think that's probably come into the game a little bit, maybe accidentally through T20, but it's into the test arena now. But yeah, there's different times. In particular, I think in a long series like what's coming up against India, 5 matches, I think throughout the series, a bowler will get on top of a batter or vice versa. And it's about maintaining that foot on the throat of that player, that matchup, through the whole time. So that's definitely happened in the past for me.
Before we get into in-game, in-over planning, what about a new player comes in? Do you dive into the analysis of this player's first-class career to try and find where you might go about it, or is it pretty much bowling over to him and you can generally tell early on what he may or may not be comfortable with?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit of the old-school nature of bowling over and see what happens. There's analysis on, there's numbers and stats on pretty much everyone these days. You might come across someone who we've never seen before and there's not much data, and it's like, okay, back to square one, and we'll just bowl a good line length, see what happens, and pick up stuff along the way. And I guess communication is then the key between the quicks and all the bowlers. But yeah, there's still a weakness there. And often guys come into Test cricket and their first 10 matches, they're flying. They're averaging 60 or 70, and they're strong where other people might be weak, and they're weak where other people might be strong, and they've just got away to a flyer. And then teams work it out, and then the stats really go around that. Okay, he struggled with the short ball. He struggles with a touch wider outside off stump. And then their career usually dips a lot. And then it's whether they can fight their way back. So, I'm probably the old school nature though.
Which I guess is why you look at the Australian Test team, there's very, very few. I can't think of too many who haven't been dropped early in their career after that initial breakthrough. Okay, in and over. So how, ideally, if you've got an idea of how you want to dismiss a guy and hit the top of off, maybe get him through the gate, how do you set that up? Does it take 2 or 3 balls to lull him into a feeling of the next one's going to go there and then do something totally different, or is it more random than that?
I think it depends on who you're bowling to. I think some guys who really think deeply about the game, like Marnus Labuschagne, you can really set them up that way. You can also bluff as well, which is big in T20 more so. And then you got guys who literally don't think about what's happened 30 seconds before, and probably like Travis said, he's just batting away, see ball, hit ball. Whereas Marnus is like, okay, he's bowled 3 out swingers in a row. Now he's going to come wide of the crease and maybe bowl an in swinger. Like, he thinks deeply about the game like that, such as Steve Smith. So it really depends who you're bowling against. But in general terms, I'm literally trying to hit that spot more often than not. I'm not a big swinger of the ball. I'm sending one down, scrambled seam, and I think it's more about me of just working my angles at my end at the crease. So I might come in normal, 2 or 3 balls. If he lets them go or plays them, great. I've landed them where I want. And then if he's letting go well, I might come just a bit wider on the crease, bowl the same area, and it feels like the ball's angling into him because I've come wider on the crease by 2 feet or a foot. And then he just lull him in to play at one he shouldn't play at, hopefully get a nick or something like that.
How do you get back control when you feel like you've lost it in that little battle that you're having one-on-one with a batter?
Yeah, so that's probably more the conversations we have in white ball cricket is, these are the great plans for plan A and when everything's going on your terms. But when the batters are setting the terms and you've just gone for, 15 off your first 3 balls or whatever it is, 18 off your first 3, what do you do now when the terms are on his terms? It's fighting your way back. I think it's sticking to your strengths first of all, but then whatever the conditions are doing is allowing you to bowl whatever's going to work best on those conditions as well.
You mentioned a couple of names there, like a Marnus or a Steve Smith. What's your plan when you're trying to find rhythm in a net and Steve Smith is middling everything? What's the plan there?
I think if I'm bowling at training, I'm sort of taking the result out of the equation.
Okay.
I'm just bowling, and if I'm feeling great, I'm in a good area, then all's sweet. If I'm bowling down leg, wide, outside off, short cut shots, then it's a worry. But if I'm bowling as well as I can, things are feeling good, hitting the right areas, Smithy's playing out of his skin, then that's not my problem. That's the next whoever we're playing next.
But it sounds like the harder one to bowl to is the Travis Head type of player. You never know if you're in total control or not.
Yeah, 100% for me is the guys who aren't technically perfect. They don't play a great forward defence. Then I find that the hardest because sometimes they might be shorter guys or taller guys, and they're cutting balls that are hitting the top of the stumps. They're backing away a bit. They're getting inside it. They're running at you. So that can sort of throw you off a little bit if you haven't seen it before. I think we've sort of seen everything now over the last few years, whether the way England play, India play, T20 days. So we've seen everything, but that sort of stuff, is a lot different to someone who plays a perfect defence. That I find that sets up to my bowling really well.
Give us an example of when you feel like you've set up a batter really well and it's all worked out, and it was a big one, a big scalp. My first series against South Africa, I think, in Australia it was, and Amler had scored a mountain of runs, I think, the previous tour. It's my first time playing against him, and I never really thought much of it the first test, but I reckon I bowled him and caught behind in the space of 5 balls, I think, something like that, in the first and second innings at Perth. Went to the second test, and you sort of, I've not quite got this guy, but I'm feeling pretty confident against him. And then you get him again, caught behind. And then it sort of you get to the third test, and you think, okay, I'm straight on when this guy comes out. And I'm starting to be inside his head a little bit. Trust me, it happens both ways as well if they're smashing you. But the longer the series goes, Nathan Lyon, Mo and Ali, that sort of stuff. Yeah. So you start to just you're on top of them, and it's just about, okay, if I start well here against him, I'm every chance of getting him again. And what was the plan against him?
Well, in Adelaide, I think was the third test. He came out and he changed up. He started walking a long way across, hoping to change my line. Hopefully I changed something to give him, one on his pads, or I drift wide and give him a cut shot or whatever it is. So he started jumping a long way across, and I literally just went with him. So I basically, the stumps weren't in play at all.
Yep.
Because he's very good off his legs. So I didn't even look at the stumps. I just looked at where he finished, pretended the stumps were behind him, just kept bowling the 4-stump channel the whole time. And because he made that change only recently, he doesn't quite know where his off stump is as opposed to normal because he's made the change. So he wasn't letting the ball go as well as he normally would because he's made that change, and then got the feather through both innings, I think, in that test match. So,
what about a batter who made you feel bereft of ideas, who took you out of your rhythm before you even looked like finding your rhythm, and basically used your plan on a piece of paper, folded up into a paper airplane and chucked it out the window?
There's been a couple, for sure. I think, first of all, there's always those matchups. Like, you just do not match up to someone. And he might think you're a good bowler, but I'm like, mate, I'm no chance of getting you out in a million years, so someone else can have a bowl. Yeah. and I know that other guys feel the same about them against them, and then I come on and whatever it is. But I think AB de Villiers is probably one who I rolled in and they think, okay, plan A. And I had this. I remember looked up at the big screen and had his boundaries, and it had my had all the sixes and fours, and it had my the red ball was on top of off stump, and that was the one glowing that went for 6 over square leg. So I was like, well, if that's my best ball and it's going for 6 over there, what am I supposed to do to this guy? And he got 130 when no one else got any runs, and that was it. So I'm glad he retired soon after that.
Was there? Yeah, fair enough. Was there a plan that day in Adelaide? We bowled India out for spare change?
No, not really.
Just come in and bowl.
We had a newish ball, the plan A. The plan A is literally for the first 20 or 30 balls of everyone's innings, plan A is the go-to. You just don't really vary from that. And then once they get through that, that's when the discussions start about, okay, do we stick here because we think this is going to work in the next hour or so? Or do we go short? Or do we go a bit wider, change the field? Gaz comes on, all that sort of stuff.
Sounds a lot less scientific than we think we think.
All about execution.
Like, oh no, they're going to bowl 3 little subtle. When Kohli comes out, it's 3 little subtle away swingers, and then maybe dart one back, and then maybe bring it Nathan on. And no, it's not quite like that.
Especially with this, I'm basically a seam bowler. I'm sending it down, landing on the same spot, and if one goes in, great. If one goes away, great. I don't know which way it's seaming. Hopefully it's a bit of grass and goes either way, and batter doesn't know either. So swing bowling is probably a different conversation, but yeah.
Now, I spoke before about setting up a batter, but does that, when you got Amla out, or maybe you got AB out for 130, that would have been pretty satisfying. But is there an overall most satisfying dismissal of your career so far?
Nothing's jumping out at me. Like, there's certainly ones you work harder than others for, and probably with India coming up, and hopefully he's not in the squad, Pujara, is when you get his wicket, you know you've deserved it.
Yeah.
And you've worked really hard to get it, and you've built pressure for a long time, and you finally get it, and it's worth it. So
fair enough.
He's one that sticks out.
What about that one in 2019 that got us a game?
Well, it's sort of a different kettle of fish a little bit. A guy who's playing an attacking role with the tail.
Yeah.
As opposed to someone which is the test match grind. I guess they're very two different things, and you sort of revert back to white ball bowling a little bit when you're in that situation of bowling at the tail and bowling at a batter, which is a big part of the game now, and it's become, over the last 5 years, a huge part of the game. But they're as satisfying as others if that stuff's to a plan, or you just sort of bowling willy-nilly and hopefully one goes up in the air.
Unrelated question to end this interview, Josh. How many times have you watched that day at the SCG against Pakistan last summer?
Not very often, actually. No, maybe once or twice. But I run into quite a few people who were there at that day, and it was obviously quite vocal because it was quite late in the day, which is always good to get a few wickets late in the day. But
it was long shadows.
I said that was a great day of Test cricket to be a watcher. So
unfortunately, I'm of the other opinion because I'd worked all that elsewhere. And I had the next day off, and I was really looking forward to just kicking back. And you ruined that day off for me, Josh Hazlewood. Thanks a lot.
No problems.
No, I'm sure you enjoyed the win.
Yeah, it was great.
Got to take the wins. Cheers, mate.
No worries. Thank you.
Back with Willow Talk after the chat with Hoff before the break. He's great. As you say, he looks likely, as we sit here right now, thinking that he's going to come back in for Scotty Boland. Poor old Scotty. But it's a good backup option to have if one of them aren't quite able to back up for the MCG. And you got Boland at the MCG. Yeah, fresh again.
You would not rule out Scott Boland playing in Melbourne because look at the results in Shield cricket this year. Like, bowlers have been absolutely loving that deck this summer so far, and that was the whole reason why Scott Boland got picked in the first place, track specialist. So
let's go around the grounds now after our drinks break on Willow Talk. Australia's women's team lead India 2-0 in their 3-match one-day series. The third one-dayer is on tomorrow at the Wacker. They've moved across there. Australia won game 1 by 5 wickets and just the 202 balls remaining as well. Megan Shute was the star there, 5 for 19, ripped through India, and Australia chased the runs down with a couple of wickets, but got there in the end. And Australia won game 2, thumping 122-run victory. Elise Perry, no shock, 105 of 75. And the new name, Georgia Vole, who was good in the WBBL, better than good, very good in the WBBL, 101 off 87. She had a role to play in the run chase in game one as well. So this fresh talent coming through keeps on popping up. Benny, we're going to see more and more over the next 5 years, given how good the WBBL is standard-wise.
Absolutely. And I think the women's team's done a fabulous job so far of slowly regenerating. Like, we haven't seen mass retirements yet or anything. Obviously, Meg Lanning's not there anymore, but they have done a great job at just gradually blooding young stars who are all standing up to the plate. And that's the way to do it. They come into an environment where they can learn from the experienced players. They're not there on their own. You just don't want that drop-off where they're all gone at once and it's a new team. So, yeah, Georgia Vole was fantastic, and it's so good to see Elise Perry still, firing off hundreds like that. What a player.
And we've got that up-and-comer Healy to possibly come back for the New Zealand series, which is right off the back of this one-dayer tomorrow at the Wacker. So get there if you can. Beautiful place to go and watch cricket, the WACA ground. And then obviously on the other side of Christmas, we've got the Ashes just around the corner as well for the women. Now, speaking of England, we'll go back to the men's. England-New Zealand. The English lead New Zealand in their 3-test series 2-0. They won the second test in Wellington they snuck home by 323 runs. England were 4 for 34, and then Harry Brook chimes in with just a little 123 off 115. Gus Atkinson with a hat-trick. Looked like they've got a couple of young quicks coming through. So it makes sense now why Brendan McCullum it felt like he expedited the retirement of James Anderson because he knew what the depth was behind Broad Anderson.
2-day test next summer, do you think?
Possibly. I wouldn't be buying tickets for the pink ball test on day 3, if you know what I mean.
Look, I mean, I know we're in the middle of what could be one of the great series right now, but I can't wait for next summer as well. And look, the big thing that England need to find before they come here next summer is fast bowlers, and Gus Atkinson doing what he's done in this test is exactly what they need.
What about him, by the way? In 10 tests, he's got a century, a tenfer, and a hat-trick. Show off.
Pretty good stuff.
Far out.
Yeah, and Joe Root is an interesting one, Feathers, because he still has that little knock on him that he's never made 100 in Australia. And I know Darren Lehman said recently that's the last kind of thing that for him to tick off to be, a truly, great player. And that wasn't designed as a criticism of Joe Root. It was just, if you're an Ashes cricketer, that's a gold-plated level that you want to get to, making 100 overseas. But look at those numbers, 19 centuries since 2001. And I know England 2021, yeah.
He's not that old.
2021. I know that England play more test cricket than anyone, but that's still remarkable.
Yeah, 19 centuries in 99 innings from that point in 2021. Kane Williamson is the next best with 9 from 41 digs. So, yeah, that's an incredible record. 36 test tons for Joe Root. So, summing it up, India thumped England at home. New Zealand thumped India away. New Zealand thumped by England at home. All of it makes complete sense with all of that. Complete sense. Anyway.
It's good to have competitive test cricket, isn't it? I mean, the World Test Championship is really up for grabs. Have to get the calculator out what the latest is there. But
Australia need to guarantee their spot. I think Australia need 3 wins and a draw from their remaining 5 tests now.
That's tight.
That's tight. But it's destiny's in their own hands, whereas a lot of the other teams need to look after their own business, and then hope that other things go wrong elsewhere. So, it's a cool little lead up to the World Test Championship, which will be in the middle of 2025. And the third test, by the way, between England and New Zealand starts on Sunday in Hamilton. South Africa, Sri Lanka, recording this before the finals day play. Sri Lanka could be set up for a good end to that one. 5 for 205, needing a further 143 runs. Another game that's going on while we sit here right now, New South Wales WA at the SCG. You mentioned some of the numbers put up by New South Wales batters earlier, namely KP, Curtis Patterson with 167 not out. New South Wales looking to bowl WA out on the final day with a big lead. And Patterson, by the way, this season, 91, 66, 71, 99, 33, 167. That's one way to go about a recall.
Bloody oath. I mean, it's exactly what he did when he did play Test cricket a few summers ago, is just went on a run of centuries. Obviously, he's out a couple of times in the 90s there, but I love that story because he was at rock bottom. I mean, he got dropped from the Shield team as captain. He was captain. He was dropped, lost the captaincy. So he really has had to, he's been humbled by all this. But it shows so much about his character, the way he's bounced back. And we so often see it, players in they get to this point where they're experienced. And he was saying yesterday he's just relaxed, and it's just a mindset thing, and I think he'll be so much better for the experiences that he's had, and you wouldn't rule out another test for Curtis if he can keep this going.
Tassie, South Australia at Bell Reef still going as well as we sit here right now, but the standout performer, Jason Sanger, 151 at number 3 in his first-class game for South Australia. That's impression-making.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's not necessarily a great look for New South Wales, who unfortunately weren't able to get as much as they would have wanted out of Jason. He's gone down to South Australia and delivered straight away. But it's great for Australian cricket because, a few years ago he was one of the brightest prospects in the country. And, sometimes it takes people a bit longer to mature. So let's hope his best is very much ahead of him.
Certainly does take certain people a long time to mature. Still laugh at fart jokes. South Australia looking okay for a victory there, but Tasmania, as we sit here right now, are going to try and chase down a big total on day 4. One game already done at the MCG. You mentioned there that games are getting done quickly there, and fair enough too, but Queensland won a thriller by 23 runs over Victoria for their first win of the Shield season. To Sundries, Mr. Burns, Joe Bernsolini, named T20 captain of Italy. Joe Burns, T20 World Cup qualifiers start in June next year. Italy will take on Guernsey, Jersey. Geez, that'll confuse an AFL. Aren't they one of the same? Guernsey, Jersey, Netherlands and Scotland during the 2025 regional final, with 2 teams advancing to the tournament proper in 2026. So Joe Burns, he's done it for family purposes, representing
such a nice
Italy.
Story, for his brother who tragically passed away. And look, Joe Burns is a likeable guy and had a better than you'd think test record. I guess it's sort of, we've probably forgotten about his test record, but made 400s. I mean, you look at guys like Marcus Harris and Cameron Bancroft that might still get another chance, have been fighting away. Joe Burns made 4 test hundreds. It's not to be sneezed at.
I wonder if there's an expectation of the Italian cricket captain to look the part, because the Italians are just so suave. Like it's the home of fashion, Milan.
Yeah, he never struck me as the fashion icon of the Australian team, Joe. But
I think a Dolce & Gabbana, or are they Italian? I'm not sure, but something like that should come with.
Get rid of the New Balance grey nickel stuff and bring in.
Yeah, like rock into training with one of those really expensive jackets with a cravat, designer sunnies, and the zhuzhing of the hair and the designer stubble and everything like that. I think it'll suit Joe.
The warm up football games, Joe might look a bit out of place there if some of the other boys have.
Do you reckon he's going to bring a Sharon
well, I hope he's bringing
a Steeden or a Steeden?
Yeah, I hope it's a Steeden.
I think it'll be a round ball somehow if he's representing Italy. But anyway,
it's funny you say that. I before the World Cup this year in the West Indies, I spoke to a couple of people who were around the West Indies when Steve Folkes, the former Canterbury Bulldogs coach, was the strength and conditioner.
Yeah.
And Steve Folkes tried to introduce touch football as a warm-up game for the West Indies.
Yeah.
And not well. I think it might have taken 4 sessions to try and even explain what the rules were, and then eventually I think they just went back to playing soccer.
I thought you were going to say it took 4 sessions and 3 anterior cruciate injuries with all the sudden movements.
Well, I think it probably took 4 sessions to get them actually on the field to have a crack at it. Yeah.
Fair enough. Didn't quite work out. Speaking of the West Indies, 9 newspapers reporting Australia will play an extra test in the Caribbean next year on their tour. Was scheduled for 2 tests, but a third is reportedly being added. Like, how does this happen? That you can change the schedule if you want to.
It's actually been in the works for about 12 months now. I think the momentum started after the West Indies gave such a great account of themselves here last summer, and it was left 1-1. Like, it'd be great to have another test. I think there's a fair bit of goodwill on the part of Cricket Australia, who haven't always been great, how would you say, putting back into the game for smaller nations. So I think Cricket Australia, I think, is seeing this as an opportunity to really help West Indies cricket. It'll probably come at the expense of a couple of the white ball games that were scheduled. So there'll be a bit of give and take there with how they shape it. But, 3 tests is always better than 2.
Is it a good thing, and you've toured the Windies, is it a good thing for the fans that you've got more test cricket over there and more time to actually enjoy things, if you know what I mean?
It's hard to say, actually, because, look, I've only been there the one time for the T20 World Cup. My experience would say you're probably more likely to get a crowd to a T20 or a one-day game than you are a test. So I don't think it's necessarily going to bring people through the gate, but it's good for West Indies cricket and for guys like Shamar Joseph who are embracing the format, to take it so seriously. So, it's great. I know Sean Marsh, he'll be hoping that Mitchell Marsh hangs on until then because he's very keen, I think, to go over and enjoy the atmosphere over there watching his brother.
Is it a misconception that it is bloody good fun for the fan?
It's definitely not a misconception.
Did you get out there, Benny, or did you just stay in the air conditioning in the press box?
Look, I didn't get out there for the matches, but certainly on some of the non-playing days, it was an enjoyable experience. Yeah,
social.
Yeah, very much so.
Shout out to your wife who might be enjoying listening to this while she was back here in Sydney looking after the kids, and you're over there with a friggin' a drink with one of those plastic umbrellas in it. Correct?
Yeah, it wasn't a place where you could send many photos back. Yeah,
fair enough. And we're going to end with this on Willow Talk. Big trouble in China's little innings. Chasing 118 to beat Thailand in Hong Kong in a T20, China were bowled out for 8. They took their time, 9.1 overs, measly run rate they've got there, but bowled out for 8 by Thailand. It's not quite 7, the Ivory Coast, of Ivory Coast a couple of weeks ago. But
so you can't quite call them the worst team ever.
No, you can't, Marnus.
Yeah.
You can't. Close enough, though.
Yeah.
How do you rejuvenate your team after being bowled out for 8, I wonder?
It's going to take a fair bit of motivating, isn't it? But, look, I mean, I suppose it's, we're seeing more and more short matches, so this is just a very, very short match.
Exactly. Benny Horne, enjoy the week, mate. Thank you very much, and look forward to reading your stuff when I log back into Code Sports and across the News Corp network. I will, I swear.
Once you finish with cricket.com and cricket info,
the free ones. Mate, appreciate you coming in, and we'll catch you at some stage again over the summer.
Cheers, Adam.
That was Willow Talk. This edition later in the week, we'll be back with Hads to look ahead in more detail to the third test coming up the Gabba at the end of the week. Yeah, thanks for watching the Willow Talk podcast on YouTube. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't have to miss an episode wherever you are. And while you're at it, check out these videos up here. They're mostly good.